Hello Internet, my name is Lave and I watched Welcome to Marwen, which is directed by the one and only Robert Zemeckis, who surely doesn't need an introduction with films like the Back to the Future trilogy in his back catalogue, as well as Castaway, Contact, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, not to mention his other animated films like Beowulf, The Polar Express. His recent films have been solid, like Flight and The Walk. I wasn't too enamoured with Allied, so I was hoping his latest film was going to evoke the same sort of emotions that I felt when I watched my favourite film of his, which is Forrest Gump. His latest is based on a true story about Mark Hogancamp, a small-town American artist who was the victim of hate crime and lost his ability to draw after being badly beaten up. So now he spends his time photographing dolls and action figures in his model village he calls Marwen, where he lives out his fantasies as a form of therapy to help him recover and face his fears. Now on paper I think that is a great concept with bags of potential, but I was really underwhelmed with this movie, and I've spent the last few days trying to figure out why that is, because I genuinely think this film has got all of the ingredients to be on the same level as Forrest Gump. It's structured in a similar way. It tells its story in a non-linear fashion, so you meet Mark after he's been attacked and you're introduced to the women of Marwen, who is based on women who have helped him in his real life. So you meet a physiotherapist, you meet a shopkeeper and a caregiver who's actually played by Game of Thrones' Gwendoline Christie, who's got an awful Russian accent, by the way. But you meet them at various points throughout the film via very brief flashbacks, but then other than that, other than the fantasy elements or the fantasy world, you don't really see them for the rest of the film. They're weirdly absent and ultimately are kind of inconsequential to the rest of the film. The focus of the film then falls onto Nicole, played by Leslie Mann, who's his new friendly neighbour and becomes inspiration for a new character in Marwen. And again, that relationship doesn't really go anywhere, despite the fact that the film suggests that she becomes his inspiration for conquering his fear. I just didn't see how she did it, because she doesn't seem to do anything. Steve Carrell delivers another decent, dramatic yet sensitive performance as Mark, this deeply traumatised guy who I did feel a bit sorry for, but not as sorry as I thought I was going to be. Perhaps that's because we don't get to see him before the attack, so we can't compare him to how he was to how he is now. He's a bit of a quirky guy, he's a bit eccentric, he likes to wear women's shoes and stilettos, which the film says isn't a fetish, it's his way of getting into the women's characters or discovering their essence, which is fine. I think the overall message of the film is a good one, which is don't be afraid to be who you want to be and do what you want to do. But I think this film doesn't strike that balance between the bitter and the sweet, which Forrest Gump did so well. It's got a bit of edginess to it. One character even says at one point, oh, it's all a bit violent, isn't it? But then it's sugar-coated violence because of the fantasy element, so it's not edgy enough. And it's also been marketed as a comedy, but then it's not funny enough. So this film isn't that triumphant imagination conquers all that I think it thinks it is. The one aspect of the film where it does excel is in the visual effects, with seamless transitions in and out of the world of Marwen, which actually does benefit from dipping into the uncanny valley. The moving and talking toys don't look quite right because they are moving and talking toys. It feels like it has been filmed on that scale. And when I say the transitions are seamless, they really are perfect. I can give an example. So when Mark goes anywhere, he takes his toys in a toy jeep which he drags along by a string, which he's doing to try and weather the tyres to make it look more realistic. And there is a moment when you're in the fantasy world and the characters are all driving in the jeep and it transitions to him pulling the jeep along, and it's absolutely perfect. I literally couldn't tell when the CG ended and when the actual physical toys began. But as good as the visual effects are, it doesn't make up for an underwhelming story. So that's my thoughts on Welcome to Marwen, and pause the video if you want to take a closer look at my enjoyment tracker now. On a technical level, this film is great, but that's what it feels like. It feels like a technical exercise where they established all of the cool scenes that they wanted to film in the fantasy world, but they didn't really flesh out the main story. There are individual elements in there which I liked, and I do really admire and respect the real Mark Hogancamp, but like his action figures and his toys, it lacks any real heart. So thanks very much for watching this review. If you've seen it, let me know what you thought down in the comments. How does it compare to Robert Zemeckis' other films? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, thanks very much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you can, give it a like and don't forget to share the Lave. Subscribe